Hello, everybody. Michael Robertson Jr. here, and this is episode 10 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. And of course, I have with me this evening my co-host, Mr. Jason Collins.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're so glad you're here to listen.
And I'm glad you're here, Jason. Always good to see your face and hear your voice.
Likewise, sir. Oh, episode 10. It's a bit of a milestone, right?
I think it is.
Episode?
I think it is a milestone. Maybe we'll get to 100 one day. That'd be fun, wouldn't it?
That would be fun.
Baby steps.
That would be fun. Let's go for 20 though first.
Well, we started this just on a whim. It was something that we had talked about. You and I have had various creative endeavors working together over the years between my writing and your video and videos we've done together. We started a very short-lived podcast about creativity about 2 years ago that never really got any traction. So going into this, we just thought it would be fun, and so far it has been, and we've managed now to keep it up for 10 weeks. So pretty good.
Yeah, I think starting this with the objective of it being fun for us, it being something for us to do together, and not have the pressure of really trying to make it something that was going to be bigger than we really needed to be at the time. We just wanted to do it. So, and here we are. And I think going in with that perspective helped a lot for both of us.
And it's also had the byproduct of this, I guess you could say, is, you and I are obviously lifelong horror fans. That's why we started this podcast, but we are in a point in our lives now between our day job, our side businesses, and then our family life, of course. We don't get the opportunity to really carve out time to organically watch as much of the horror films as we'd like to. So this has kind of given you and I an excuse to watch more of these films. And to be honest, if it wasn't for this podcast, I probably would not have watched some of these films that we've done episodes on. And I'm glad that we have.
Same. I agree. And on top of being able to watch these fun films together in air quotes, right? But to watch these fun films together, we get to hang out, and that's something we don't get to do often either. Listeners might not know this, but we are like lifelong friends since we were little, and It wasn't. Well, I keep saying it wasn't like that long ago, but it was 10 years or more since you left all of us, and
I know
you moved away, and it just, oh man. It's like a piece of me left with you.
It will actually be 13 years this October, I believe. It's crazy. I know.
That's so crazy to think of.
Yeah. I'm not that far away. I'm only 2 hours away. I didn't move across the country, but when you grow up basically in each other's backyards and now you're 2 hours away, it's pretty jarring.
That's true.
But
and with like more of life going on every day, it's as well as I do, it's just hard to pull away and carve out time just dedicated to hanging out with a best friend.
Right.
Especially, even if you were just down the street, it's exponentially harder when you're 2 hours away. So
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I was actually thinking about that. I think it was either today or yesterday. I was trying to remember when the last time I actually saw you in person was. And I think it was December when I was in town visiting my parents and we had lunch together. And I was thinking, my gosh, it's been 4 months since I've actually seen you. And, I'd like to say that that's partially because of the whole, COVID-19, but I'm not convinced that it would have been any different otherwise given our schedules. But such is being an adult.
Yeah, for sure. The COVID-19 did play a big effect. I mean, during the winter season, I am slower with the photography and videography business. So we would have spent more time together, probably, but, things happen. Here we are in the middle of a pandemic, and we're doing our podcasts.
Yeah. Well, when the pandemic's over, I can guarantee you we're going to see each other. We're going to do something together. Maybe record one of these episodes together in person instead of on the computer. So
that'd be fun. Well, how's life going for you?
It's good. I mean, relatively speaking to the state of the world, it's fine. I can't complain. I'm healthy. My family's healthy. I still have a job. I'm writing. I still have readers I get to interact with. I'm doing the podcast with you. I can't complain. So,
yeah, same here. It's interesting to see how technology has really kind of aided in bringing us all together. Social media, but especially things like this, the podcast where we can kind of FaceTime and and do video and talk about these things. But also, I actually just got off of a Zoom happy hour with Kristen and her Krav Maga family. And so, speaking of which, I am about maybe 3 drinks in, so you might be carrying this podcast.
While your words are slurring and you're swaying in your chair. I got it. Okay.
I can't stop sweating for some reason. It's not even that hot in here.
Gosh. Okay. Yeah. We were gonna get started before you pass out in the episode, and he's still drinking. I don't understand what's happening here.
I'm just finishing it up. You can't waste a drink. Come on, man.
Okay. Well, before we get into tonight's film, I did want to talk about one thing that I saw in the news this week that's a little bit of a callback to one of our earlier episodes. It was the Invisible Man episode, actually, when we were talking about how Blumhouse made the decision. They were one of the early movies that went. They ended the theatrical release early, and they went straight to the iTunes rental, the premium video on demand, I think they were calling it. And you and I are very much a fan of that. Almost advocating for more studios and more movies to do that, even after this pandemic hopefully comes to an end. Well, the CEO of NBC Universal went on record this week saying that they have done so well with these video on demand releases. The movie that he was referencing in his statistics was the new Trolls movie, the animated kids film. And they showed some numbers, and it was just astonishing what they made exclusively video on demand versus what they made with the first Trolls film in the theaters for the same 3-week opening period. And they went on record saying that, yeah, even when this is over, we're going to continue to look at doing video on demand, these premium video on demand releases along with the theatrical releases. It's working out well. The CEO of AMC Theaters had a fit about this, basically threw a tantrum and said, well, we're not going to show any Universal movies in our theaters ever again if that's the case. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, how does this threaten Universal? If they just told you that they made almost as much money off of the video on demand versus it being in the theater, and your response is, well, we don't want it in the theater anymore. I mean,
really.
I don't.
Yeah, don't corner them into a market that you're just not even supporting.
Right.
Like, how does that help your cause at all?
Yeah, and they never said, Universal never said we won't put our movies in theaters. They just said we're going to do this maybe more often or even sooner than we would normally do it. That kind of thing. Right. So I don't know. I was reading that one article and I was just thinking, I don't know what ground AMC has to stand on here. Like, I don't think you have the deciding power. They're giving you the movie. Like, if they can make the same money elsewhere, I don't know. I thought it was kind of weird how they reacted. But anyway, it's almost kind of like, I have to think back to the whole, Blockbuster wasn't afraid of Netflix, fast enough. Is this something similar? I don't know.
Yeah. But, we could see a big turn in the industry.
Yeah. So I just thought that was interesting because I know we had talked about it for quite a while in that episode with the Invisible Man. And again, I am all for it. Give me all the premium video on demand all day long to keep me from having to go to a bloody movie theater.
Yeah, I agree.
So, all right, moving on from that. Tonight, we are finishing up the trilogy. We are talking about HOUSE LLC III, Lake of Fire. And this is another recent release, September 2019. This movie came out not too long ago. I just happened to have stumbled across the first one about this time, last fall, around Halloween season. So I didn't have to wait, I guess, for the releases to roll out, but which is nice. But this is the third episode in a row that we've done. We just, like I said last week, decided to go ahead and just finish out the trilogy. And I'm glad we did it because all in all, it was a fun story, and it was nice to see the whole thing, from start to finish, come to an end that I actually thought was pretty satisfying.
Yeah, I agree, man. It was a really great trilogy. It was a really great story. And you said earlier before we even started recording that you really like to see these universes like built in, and just kind of start to see characters build and everything kind of revolving in the same world. And to see this one wrap up, it was really, like you said, it was a good, satisfying end. I liked it.
Yep. This one, the third installment, the final installment in the trilogy, was also written and directed by Stephen Cognetti. And we had a slew of new characters in this film, and then also a handful of the previous characters from the previous two films, and they all, they didn't necessarily have huge roles, but they had roles that were, I mean, pretty fun. I enjoyed the callbacks when they happened.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they weren't huge roles, but they were staple roles. They really aided to the way it ended. And then also the very end too was fun. It was good.
Yep.
So
So
we didn't see many characters from the second movie.
correct. Yeah. The emphasis was mostly on the first one,
Yeah.
and in the grand
Which
scheme of the
doesn't
story,
really surprise me or disappoint me.
no, I know we are both big fans of those characters. So, I guess the newcomers that are of note, we have Gabriel. Is it Chitry or Chitry, who played Russell Wynn, who was kind of our main protagonist slash antagonist. Kind of went back and forth, in the viewers' minds, I think, until the end. Elizabeth Vermillia was Vanessa Shepard. Sam Kazi was Jeff Stone. Scott Ritchie played Harvey, who I actually really liked as a character, and I went on the IMDb to just to get his name, obviously, and then see what else he's been in. He's got no picture on IMDb. It's just the blank avatar and like really nothing else that he's done. So I was kind of surprised by that because I thought he was one of the stronger performers in the film. And then we also had Bridget Abrams as Jane, and then going back to the first film, we had Ryan Jennifer Jones reprising her role as Sarah, Danny Bellini as Alex, Gore Abrams as Paul, and then Adam Schneider again. And I was a big fan of this. We had Theodore Bolaukos, something like that. Apologies, Theodore, reprising his role as the author, Robert Lyons. I don't know why. I just like that guy's screen presence. He just seems so natural. Like I just like his little character. So I was glad to see him.
He's good. I like him a lot.
So.
I do want to make an apology. Neither of us could remember Alex's character's name in the last podcast. So Alex Taylor was the character. He reprised his role here.
Not only could we not remember, I don't think I even offered a name. You created a name that wasn't even in any of the movies. You called him Nick. So
Nick,
I mean,
right,
that's
I was
good.
going with Nick.
Anyway, a lot of characters, a lot of moving parts, and rightfully so, considering this story really does sum up all the little plot lines we've seen laid out in the first two films.
Yeah. So I mean, basically. Going right off of IMDb here, just a quick synopsis. The Abaddon Hotel will once again be open to the public, which is just crazy, right? With its history. But Russell Wynn has taken his audience interactive show Insomnia into the Abaddon Hotel that, of course, is rumored to be haunted.
Right. And not only does he does he bring his theatrical play, which is a live audience interactive performance, into the hotel, he also invites Vanessa Shepard, who is the new host of the Morning Mysteries show, which is the, talk show from the second film. She comes in with her cameraman to kind of do an exclusive behind-the-scenes documentary of the production of the play. So... that was kind of cool. And one thing that I did really like about this, not only did we have a slew of characters that had different roles in this movie, more so than the first two, we get a section where there are multiple points of view. When the writer in me really perked up when Vanessa was kind of introducing herself to the cast and the crew of the play, that one night where they were all gathered together in that one room, and she said, some of you have been given your own cameras. Instantly, I thought to myself, oh, multiple points of view. Here we go. Like, we're branching out from kind of like the solo or the one or two person that had, the camera with them. And I got really excited because I like that as I instantly recognized it as the plot device that it was. Like, you have to be able to show other people's characters. Vanessa and her guy aren't going to be with everybody the whole time. And it actually kind of reminded me a little bit of something I read several years ago about Harry Potter, with something that J.K. Rowling did. If you've read the Harry Potter series from a literary standpoint, it is a third-person limited point of view. The entire stories, all 7 books, are told from Harry Potter's perspective, right? It's not an I, it's a he. It's third person, but it's limited just to him. The invisibility cloak that he gets and uses to sneak around the castle, which obviously is very, clever as a thing in general in the magical world. It's a plot device. She had to have a way to get him into situations to see what other characters were doing and hear what they were saying without him actually having to be in the scene. So that just kind of sprang to mind when I saw the multiple cameras. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool. I like that. So we open up and we're basically the majority of the movie. We're following Vanessa Shepherd throughout the entire movie because it's basically her found footage, right? Would you still consider this a found footage movie? This third one.
Well, parts of it are, and this is what this is kind of going back to what I thought was interesting was the time frame of this movie, which again is 9 years after the events of the first Hell House film. We as the viewers are coming off the second film where that crew goes in, to try and figure out what happens, and they vanish. We have seen that, and the movie stated that this footage was brought to you by Wynn Entertainment or Wynn Media or whatever Russell Wynn's, company was. So obviously they had it, they found the footage, they created this. But the timeline for the third film, we as the viewers are once again told this is a compilation of all of this footage that we have found over the years from these different sources. But the people in the movie that are still in the present have no idea what happened to that second group from the second movie, except for Russell Wynn. He has the footage, which we don't really discover until the one little scene in the hotel room where they go to see him and he's got it up on the laptop. Right. And so there really is some really smart writing in this to keep these things in line and in order to kind of, show the viewer, but not really give everything away, but also keep the people that are in the movie confused as to what's really happening.
Yeah, I thought it was really smart to have it still feel like a found footage film because it felt like it, but for the most part, it really wasn't. It had a very produced look to it throughout the entire movie. All the cohesiveness throughout the entire movie was really well done, and from an editing standpoint and a writing standpoint, but it still felt like this found footage. But when you really get down to it, sort of wasn't. It was more of a produced film, made on purpose, but it was. I thought that was smart. The way at the very end, I was like, well, I don't know if I'd consider it a found footage. It used a lot of found footage, but from a production standpoint, it definitely was stepped up from the second movie, and it was a far shot from the first one being just mainly found footage where you're just right in the guts of it. Yeah. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, I guess this one's approach of being more of an actual commissioned documentary gave it a little more of a polished feel than I think the second one did. So that was pretty cool. So in my notes here, I even have the production value of this one. It did set the bar a little higher again. You and I both said how the first film is by far our favorite. I can still say that now after watching the third one. This one I really enjoyed. The second one was a little bit of a dip for me for various reasons, which we talked about. But I was really happy with this one, and there was some stuff in here that again I was just clever. One of the scenes that I want to talk about that was kind of cool, and there's one of these kind of scenes in every one of these movies, is the scene after the first day of shooting with Vanessa, and her camera guy comes back to her hotel room and says, hey, look at this, look what I found in this clip. And there's a moment where she first goes on the scene, and she goes into the Abaddon for the first time with the crew of this play, and the lights go out, the power goes out, and he's like, oh, don't worry, it happens all the time, it'll be back in like 10 seconds. It comes back on, and then they move on. Well, the camera guy replays this footage, and in the background, barely visible, kind of reminiscent to one of the scenes from The Haunting of Hill House. We saw lots of those kind of hidden ghost figures in that. Yeah. There is a ghost. There's a person, hiding in the background, lurking in the shadows. And when I saw that, again, I love that stuff. It's creepy. I like it. It's effective. When I got to that point in the film, I stopped. I scrolled back to the actual scene where it happened because I wanted to see if it was really in there, if it was something that they had done just for
Yeah.
the thing. So I scrolled back and I rewatched it, and yeah, sure enough, that person is in the background of that scene. So I thought it was cool. It
That's
was a nice
nice.
touch because
You
it was
know,
just hiding in plain sight.
I thought even during the first film, and then it caught my eye during the second one, but I was looking for it in the third. I was thinking I was seeing those cloaked persons all the time, just like in a quick like pan, and they were in a corner. I kept seeing them all over the place, but they never brought any attention to them. So I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. I'd love to know if they were really placed in those scenes, just for those quick glimpses, just in case somebody caught a glimpse of it, just like they did in the Haunting of Hill House, where if you were good enough to catch it, it's there. I felt like I was seeing those things all the time. It could have been just in my head, but I'd love to know. I'd love to know if they really were in there.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. We have to look deeper into that maybe in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually did watch this movie twice. I watched it, first this weekend and made my first pass with some notes, and then watched it again today before we recorded this, just to kind of refresh. And again, I stand by it. It's a good movie. I was happy with the way everything kind of came together. But let's talk a little bit more about the plot, because the just like the production value of this one, I felt that the writing was really kind of back on point with this one too. And coming from somebody who has written a few novels over the years and has tried to juggle multiple plot lines and make something entertaining that has a bit of mystery, that you're not trying to give everything away until the end and have it explained, but also leave enough breadcrumbs throughout that people could potentially figure it out on their own if they really thought about it. This movie did that. And one thing it did really good was it kept the audience guessing, primarily with one of the main characters, with Russell Wynn's character. He's a very mysterious character. Right from the beginning, he has this air of mystique to him. He has a lot of money. That he's now brought this theatrical performance to the Abaddon. Why? Why are people still coming to the Abaddon? That he has some sort of deal or communication that he has set up with this priest in this town that he's never been in before, basically, as far as some of the reactions he has to some of the cast and crew's concerns, even Vanessa, the documentarian that he's brought on, you can't figure him out, and you can't tell, is he a good guy or a bad guy? And then you throw in the whole theme of his play Insomnia, the whole Faustian theme, which has been just beat to death in literary works and film over the years, and you start to jump onto that and latch onto it, and you go, oh, okay, he's doing this play about Faust, but he's Faust himself. You're convinced that he is going along, he's made a deal, but you don't think it's the right kind of deal. You don't think this is something that's going to work out well in the end. So we don't have to get into that right now. We can get to it in the end, but I thought that his character arc was really fascinating, and it was great to keep the viewer kind of off balance. You didn't know what was happening with him.
Yeah, that was really clever with him and his character throughout the entire movie, because he had a huge character arc from the beginning to the end, and like you said, it's keeping the viewers guessing the whole time. But what even aided more to that was that his crew they weren't really on board with what was going on. Like they were kind of like his disciples. They were there with him. They were going to follow him, but they didn't really know what was going on. They had a lot of questions about what he was doing, and he would not really provide a lot of answers, but they were there with him. Here's a guy that he had a very successful show in New York, and again he comes to this podunk town with this haunted hotel. Why are you doing this? He had this troubled past where he had a bad car wreck, and everybody kind of knew about that, and there was a lot of speculation about his behavior after the car wreck, and a lot of that aids itself well into the end. So there was a lot of not only guessing from the viewers, but you could see everybody that was following him was also guessing him throughout the entire movie too.
Right, and again, that is I made this comment to you. I think I said it in the episodes previous, and maybe I don't think I just made it to you offline. But another thing that's really cool about this series is the plots of these films are so similar. I mean, think about what you just said for a second again. when you said, he's got this crew. They're like his disciples. They're just following him, but they really, they have questions. They don't understand what's going on. Is that not the first film? Everybody is just, following Alex blindly because he's the leader and they kind of trust him. But at the same time, they're starting to freak out. They're starting to question his motives, why they're still there. It's interesting how it's just repeating itself, but it's getting bigger each time.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because both Alex and Russell played very similar roles in this entire trilogy, but there was a stark contrast, right? So again, I want to keep it spoiler free, but they had a very interesting, black and white contrast going there the whole time. It was, I really enjoyed the way the story wrapped up. And I'd love to know if the rest of the story 2 and 3 were always part of the whole story, as or if it was just sort of like, okay, 1 did really well, and so we kind of want to see where the rest of this goes, this Abaddon Hotel. I'd love to know that part of it too.
Right. Yeah, we discussed that. Did we discuss that in last episode, or again, was that something that we talked about offline? Because the way that when you see the end of this and you see some of the stuff they did with the editing and some additional scenes, you have to wonder, was this always, from the writer's perspective, was this always going to be a trilogy, or was this I told my first story that, I was then able to build off of and create the rest of it because people wanted it. I had the ability to now, because I could see it going either way very easily. But so I'm definitely curious about that as well. But I guess we'll never know. I don't know. What do you think this movie compared to the first film, and then you look at the third film, and again the similarities? Do you think that was again purely intentional, or do you think when the story was told it just happened to be that way? Because like you said, we have Alex and we have Russell, and we had their story arcs that were similar but kind of going in the opposite trajectories when you found out what their motives were. And that kind of goes back to the beginning. Was this always a planned trilogy? Because it just worked out so well story-wise.
Yeah, it did work out really well. And your question was if I thought it was, or what was your question? Like, if I thought it was planned out just because of the story arcs, the way they were basically the same from 1 and 3.
Yeah, I mean, because like I said, it's so surprising to me how similar, again, the plots of all 3 of these films are, but particularly 1 and 3. Yet they each have their own unique voice, and that's why I'm wondering, was this always a trilogy? I wanted the answer to that, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't think we'll be able to answer that ourselves, but I think it was really if it wasn't a planned trilogy, they did a great job of creating the rest of the story to be able to ride that first film and its story arc, but fork off in a different direction right at the end. Right. There was something interesting that I think the rest of the entire trilogy, it almost seemed like, and you brought up a question in, I think it was the first podcast about the first episode. Why aren't these ghosts equal opportunity scarers? Right? You kept saying they only keep scaring the guy with the camera.
Right.
And I think the second movie spoke a lot to that theory, and then also again that carried over into third. But it's almost like the hotel, or the people using the hotel, they needed the media to be able to bring people to the hotel for their Lake of Fire. Otherwise they weren't going to get people there.
Right.
So I think that's why they were only scaring people that had cameras, because think of it as in terms of
they wanted the publicity. They wanted the publicity. It's like an advertisement for them. They
wanted the publicity, right? Exactly. Yeah. And even in the third one, the camera crew comes in, right? And at first Vanessa doesn't want to go in. She's scared to death, right? And they're like, and the main guy, what does he say? Jeff, the operations, the chief operations guy. He was like, "We've been here for 3 weeks. Nothing's happened." Right.
Right.
People are there. They've been there for 3 weeks now, almost a month. Nothing's been going on. But as soon as a camera gets in their face, everything starts to happen.
Right.
So it's almost like things are happening on purpose because there's a camera there and they want to be able to throw that out there later to get people out. They need that publicity, like you said. I just thought, so when I pieced that together at the during the third movie, I was immediately taken back to your question in the first podcast about this, and I think that probably had a lot to do with the motive and the why the ghosts were picking the people with the cameras,
right,
and why they really were putting all these pieces together to get these groups of people together, right? We're not an active hotel anymore, so we can't bring in people. And if we are an active hotel and people start missing, people stop coming. But if we can get a big group together all at one time, yep, let's try to make that work.
Well, we got a very detailed explanation as to what the hotel's motives were at the end of the second film. Very detailed.
Quite detailed.
Yeah. But you made a good point there about the camera being what almost like what they were performing for. The one cast member from Insomnia that left, they brought up her Instagram pictures, remember? And this was my man, Robert Lyons here, the author. He was like, if you look closely at the pictures, there's some weird stuff going on there. So Jeff had already told, Vanessa, hey, we've been here 3 weeks, nothing's going on. Well, maybe there wasn't anything major going on, but the chick that was snapping Instagram pictures, she still got ghost bad dudes in the background, showing their face, just little snippets of them. So there you go. They show up for the camera when the lights turn on. They're there. That's kind of interesting. That's a good point. I'm not sure that I actually really put that together in my head the way that you explained it, but that's a really good explanation as to how the plot actually has worked out. Why did they wait 3 weeks to start terrorizing everybody? That's a good point. So, the piano tune, I want to talk about that for a second. It wasn't until the third film, for some reason, that it hit me as to how big the piano tune is for this series. It's almost a character. When that music when it started playing in the third film for no reason, right? I mean, in this film, more than the first two, there's no reason that you should be hearing that music being played in that hotel. It was one of the few creepy moments to me in this movie. This movie, I think I said it was the least scary to me. And I think it was just because, we've kind of been there, done that. It was more for the story this go round. It was, let me get to the characters. I enjoyed being back in the world to see how this was going to end. It did not have the scare, the anxiety, all the, just dread that you felt from the first one and some of the creepy moments from the second one. There was a few moments I did enjoy from the creepy perspective, but it was not a scary film. But that piano tune, when you start hearing it, it's like the Jaws, da-da, something is about to happen.
What I was comparing it to.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was pretty. If people still had ringtones these days and everybody didn't keep their phones on silent, I would love to get that piano tune as my ringtone. I think that would be kind of funny. So
did you pick up? Because you watched it twice. I only watched it one time, but I actually ran this back twice because I found it distracting the first time. I just kept listening to the piano and I wasn't really listening to the dialogue, but it was the interview with the priest in the church. So as soon as he started talking about what was going on, there was like this kind of, it sounded like somebody was kind of just prepping and getting ready and practicing on the piano in the background. And then as he started to progress in his dialogue, it started to immediately go right into the tune. And so that was at the church. And so I thought that was interesting. It wasn't just like this this tune that was happening over like the video. It seemed like it was something that was happening in the background because it was all jumbled and messed up in the very beginning. Like somebody was just sitting down and kind of like maybe adjusting themselves and figuring out where the keys and kind of getting comfortable. And then as soon as they were there, they started playing the tune again. I thought that was like, it was creepy. It gave me chills while he was talking, and I just completely tuned him out talking. I was immediately listening to the piano. And that's why I had to run it back because I was like, I don't know what he said because I was trying to figure out why that tune was playing.
Right. And to be completely honest with you, I have no recollection of that happening. I remember the scene, talking to the priest in the church. I don't remember the music, but if that is the case, if that's the way they transition, uh, that's really clever, actually. And we talked a little bit about this in the second one. I think we definitely in the first one, the second episode as well, when we're talking particularly about the scene where the Facebook Live boy goes in and he freezes in fear, kind of, and there's the ghost on the stairway, and they just
Right.
like that. These films, all three, have done a really good job at creating scares and having the moments that make you think and make you kind of shiver, like you say, get the chills, without having to show it on camera. It's words, it's sound, it's subtle things that really just emphasize what you're seeing, but it's not all there in your face, and I love that. I always love that kind of scare.
Yeah, me too. I think this is a low key brilliant horror film, and you can definitely tell that because the masses do not like this movie for some reason. Like, the masses love the first one. And I think between the two of us, we can both agree that the second was probably the weakest. Number 3 was not as strong as the first, but it was also a very different film, right? The first was a great found footage film.
Right.
The third is a very strong documentary about what's going on at the Abaddon Hotel and also wrapping up this story.
Right.
So it's a different type of film. But throughout the entire trilogy, throughout the entire series, there are some really smart horror things that are going on that you have to really be paying attention. And if you're not really like sucked into, the production value, or, the acting is not great, and you're not really paying attention and like really getting intimate with the movie, you miss out on a lot of the great opportunities to be scared.
Right. Which goes back to what I always preach about horror films is watch it when somewhere where you can pay attention, crank the sound up, and commit to it. Get intimate with the movie, because it's an intimate genre. It always is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree 100%. Why don't we take a quick break, and then we can come back and talk about maybe some of our favorite moments from this movie, and then have a wrap up on this film and then the trilogy as a whole. Sound good?
Yeah, man.
Cool. Let's take a break. All right, we're back. I know I said that the first one definitely had the best scares. I don't think there's any question about that. That's my opinion. I think that's your opinion, and just based on some of the reviews I've read online, I think that's kind of the masses' opinion. But this movie, and we talked about it, the second one has some good scares as well, just some creepy moments. This one, not so heavy on the creepy. Again, I think it was more of just finishing the story. You kind of knew what to come to expect. One of the things I also think, just kind of potentially took away from some of the creepiness of this film was just how many people were there. When you look at the first movie, there was just the close-knit group of a few friends that were working. The second movie was, the little documentary crew that went in. This movie, it was like a party, right? There's just so many people there. It loses a little bit of that intimacy that we talked about, because there's just so much going on. But
yeah, Russell's cast had a pretty big crew for his show Insomnia. So there's a lot of people to keep up with.
Yeah.
I don't think that took away too much from the film for me. But because there were still key players in the film, or in the cast.
Right.
But there were a lot of people to keep up with, for sure.
Well, I guess what I mean was the portions, like, this movie has the most action-packed climax, which works against being creepy, right? It just it becomes more of an action kind of slasher, gory mess, more so than the first two. So again, just kind of a different just vibe overall from this one, like you said in the beginning, with the production of being more of a documentary officially, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the climax did have a lot going on, and I don't know if that was to its detriment or not, but it was definitely a very different feeling from the first. But also in the first two, we just really had no idea what was happening. I
Right.
mean, it was just the mystery of it was really what um, was was causing a lot of the anxiety and the fear too. And then the other thing too, by the time we get to the third movie of the universe, a lot of the main scares are kind of old hat, like the clown.
Right.
But the clown probably had one of my favorite scenes of all three of the movies in the third,
Right.
and that's when you really got to see, and it was very subtle, but you get to see him moving. Like you
Right.
saw him move a little bit in the second one, but this one it was like super creepy watching him move
Right.
and follow the camera. I was like, that's doing it for me.
Yep.
That's good right there.
Yep. And that, but see, and that's one of those, that scene is a scene that's very reminiscent of the first film.
Mm-hmm.
It's, again, it's one person, alone in the dark. That's what makes them creepy.
Yeah, found footage is, I think, as a whole, probably stronger with a smaller cast, a more intimate cast, and that kind of goes into your what you were talking about in the second pod, in the podcast about the second movie, where if you don't really have a lot invested into the characters, then it's not scary, right?
Right.
And when you get a bigger cast, it's hard to be invested into all of those people. Take the Blair Witch. There was only 3 of them. In the first movie, there was only 4 of them, maybe 5. I can't remember now exactly, but there was a small amount of people. But like you said, in this one, there's a much bigger cast, so it's hard to really get invested in everybody around. But they did a good job of building up that scene and making you care about the one person that was deciding to go back into the house. So it was well done, from a writing standpoint. But I do see where you're coming from, where it's having a bigger cast really, it pulls you away from the feeling of the first movie.
Right. And again, and the end of this one is just so action packed. It's not the subtle build up. It's more of just an explosion at the end, on opening night. You mentioned the clown, and the scene that I think you're talking about in the clown, with where the girl goes into the basement. That scene is very creepy. It's one of my favorite scenes as well. One of my other favorite moments happens moments before that, when she's in the house. But when you put the two together, they became 2 of my favorite moments, but also posed one of my biggest plot. Wait a minute, what, why, how question. And to set this up for the listener, there's a moment where one of the members of the crew of this play basically gets dared, or she makes a bet to go into the house at night with her video camera, sneak down to the basement and touch the nose of the clown that's in the basement. And so we're following, with her through her camera, going through the house at night. It's dark. She's weaving her way through, and she gets to the bar, the bar in the restaurant, which has been featured in every movie. And she does this turnaround shot where she's holding the camera up kind of selfie style, looking at her face. She says something, and behind her, we can see, is the Hell House crew from the first film, hanging out at the bar, just creepy as hell back there, just looking right at her, looking into the camera with her. And she does nothing. She can't see them in the screen of the camera. She then finishes her way down to the basement. She has her moment with the clown, and the clown scene is one of these subtle things which we talked about that they did so well in the first movie. And we were like, how does this work every time? Because it's always creepy, where you look one way and the clown's sitting in one direction, you look back, you look away again or whatever, and now it's looking in a different direction. There's a really close-up tight shot of this where the clown is, looking straight. She's got the camera again, selfie mode, talking to the guys for this bet. And when she turns back, the clown is looking at her, and she can see that the clown is different.
Right.
So I was just wondering, how did she see that the clown had moved, but she couldn't see the people behind her at the bar?
Right. Yeah, I didn't. Now, I didn't pick up on that immediately. And was that the thing that you were talking about, the sort of the weird kind of plot thing going on?
That was the one that I mentioned in the break. Yeah, when we were chatting offline, that was one that just threw me because I thought it was such a cool scene. Like both of them are great on their own, but when you analyze them together, you go, well, how come she couldn't see them, but she can see the clown to move in the screen?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because if she couldn't see, because we're seeing what the camera's seeing, so we can't just say, oh well, the camera picked up the ghost, but she couldn't see it in real life because she was looking at it through the viewfinder of the camera or through the screen of the camera. So it threw me. I'm not gonna dwell on it because I thought it was a great scene. I loved it.
Sure,
but it made me think.
Yeah, the one that got me, and it was like, it hit me in the middle of it happening. I was like, how is this even happening? Like, how are we even seeing this? Honestly,
is it the camera spin?
No.
Okay.
It was the very end.
Oh, right. Like the
and I don't want to spoil it, right? But
yeah.
I was like, how are we getting this footage? Like, how is this happening? How are we seeing this? Because this isn't happening in our realm, right?
Right.
So I was thrown way out at that point. I was like, I don't understand. I understand this is found footage, but I don't think they found this. So I was very confused.
God,
like
Russell,
I liked how it wrapped up, and I was happy with it. But I was like, I don't think anybody found this. I don't.
Well, I think I'm gonna say something. I think we can excuse this because it happened after the end of the film, right? They showed those little clips like interspersed with some of the credits.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there was a hard break between the found footage movie and just showing the audience what was happening,
like what was going on.
Yeah. So that's the excuse that I'm giving it. It makes,
I'll take it.
Yeah. So the one that threw me, that I went from this is really cool how this is an interesting way that they're showing this with the camera, and then I transitioned into kind of like you said, how the hell is this happening? Like, I don't understand how this goes against everything that should be able to be shown from this perspective that I'm in right now.
Right.
And then it transitioned from that to, oh, now I understand. That is a callback. I love now that this was set up for a reason. And I'm talking about the spinning camera in the at the end with the climax.
Oh, Dolly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When that thing kept going around and
Susan,
around.
Sorry, not Dolly.
The Lazy Susan, yeah.
Yeah.
When that thing kept going around, I was like, how is this because my first thought was somebody threw it down and it just happened to be spinning. But then it just kept going and it kept going. And I was like, how long can this thing spin? And how is it doing it for so long, so slow? Like, I was like so confused.
Very same pace.
Right. Yeah. And then when I realized what it was on.
It was a good setup. It was something they definitely paid off on at the end.
Yeah. And I love that because, and this is one of those questions that I have because, like, imagine you're writing this. I'm looking at it from the writing perspective again. Like, I'm writing this scene where we're introducing this character. He's a bartender, whatever. And he happens to have this Lazy Susan here. Like, are you already thinking ahead? Like, that is going to be something really cool that I can put the camera on to get a shot. Because with a screenplay, I mean, at that point, you're writing the story plot-wise, but also creating a device for which you are going to place a camera on to tell the story visually later.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that was actually set up that way in the plot?
I don't know. It's hard to tell because I don't write. I'm not a writer. And I don't know. I can't even speculate. But I mean, have you ever gone through some of your stories and had something happen, near the end, during the climax where, oh, I could probably pay off on this earlier from the story and then go back and fit it in somewhere?
Yes.
Have you ever done that?
All the time. Yeah. So I mean, in both ways.
I feel like that's probably
what happened.
That's probably the way it goes. It's got to be, right?
Yeah. I do it both ways. I mean, I write stuff in the beginning that, because I don't plot very often. I don't do extensive outlines. I'm much more of an organic, by the seat of my pants writer, that I know I have plot points I want to try to hit, and I usually have some sort of ending. But I do it all the time where I'll write stuff in the beginning and then organically stuff plays out and I create connections. I create, solutions based on what I have. But I've also done it the other way where I get to the end and I go, I need something, and I have to go back and sprinkle it in. But that's all literary. I've never done it from both brains where I'm writing a story and thinking about how to show it to the audience with limited tools, because he had to show it from the camera, right? This isn't like a normal movie where you can just set up the shot however you want to set it up. Like, you are limited to a handheld camera that the audience knows that's all you have to be able to show you something. So I thought that was interesting.
And that brings up something that occurred to me that bothered me. It bothered me for a little while, actually, until I realized, oh, no, duh, this is a documentary found footage. And again, I'm going to try to, we're not really spoiling anything because we really don't know what was in the package, right? But it was one of those situations where he received that, and then he tucked it away, and then he goes back to it, and you see him get, and he goes back, and he does his thing, right?
Gosh, that was such a detailed description. It's somebody that hasn't seen the movie.
I'm trying to be vague, right? I don't want to give anything away, but it's basically, somebody, a character receives something and he puts it in a safe. And then later on in the movie, he goes back and gets it, and he goes and he uses it for something, but you don't know A, what it is, or B, what he uses it for. Right. And so I was thinking later that it bothered me so much that we couldn't had a tighter shot on what was going on, or look into the film, or look into the safe, or, maybe a later shot calling back or what was in the box, And I was like, why didn't they show that? And I was like, oh, we're dealing with just found footage. Like, at the point we were just looking at like some CCTV footage of what was going on. I was like, oh, that's right. That really handcuffs you into a lot of situations where it's like, you've got to play vague because you don't have any other options, right? That's got to be difficult to write when it's like where all of a sudden you are handcuffed to, or like a security camera in the corner, or is somebody going to be around? Like you said, with the limited third person with the cloak, she had to use it because she had to get in and hear other people talking, right? Where they had to hand out cameras so we could get other people's perspectives. But it's like, how do you put somebody in the perspective of where they can see what's going on in this box or this safe? It was just like, it was such an epiphany later on. I was like, oh, that's why. It's just
right.
It bothered me so much for so long, but now and then I was like, all of a sudden, I was just like, I don't even know how they could have done that any better, honestly.
Well, I had a thought like that about not fully understanding. But it wasn't like wasn't because you couldn't see something. It's because you couldn't hear something. We never knew what Russell Wynn said to Vanessa in the restaurant before he left that night. After he tells her, I don't think you should come to opening night. Like I don't know what he said. It's baffling to me because even at the end when because she's got some talking head monologues after the fact here, she doesn't ever mention it. Even then, I mean, I thought maybe there's going to be a payoff with that afterward when everything had kind of ended. Nope, nothing. So I'm curious. I'm curious about that.
I've come to sort of appreciate that in this trilogy because there's quite a few things that are said or assumed that you never really know 100% what that story was or what that dialogue was. So that happened a couple times.
Yeah, and that's. One thing that all three of these films did really well, again, I think I said this already, was I mentioned it about with Russell Wynn, that character. There's a mystery to all of this. There's a mystique that carries through everything. There are unanswered questions, some big, some small, that just, they propel you to want to keep watching, like, because you want to know these things. I mean, we talked about it, like, we loved the first entry to this trilogy. We didn't love the second one as much, but at that point, we're 2 stories in. We know the third is the end. We want to know how it's going to, come to an end. We want to know what the conclusion is. We want to see the finish line so we get the full picture. So, again, kudos, I guess, to the writing to be able to – the more I think about it, we've talked about it, I think the first one was a one and done that had success, and I think the last 2 then built off of it. That's – if we're going to make bets, like right now, I'm putting bet on – first one was going to be a standalone, and then the second two followed after the success of the first. It was shoehorned in, so to speak, but done really well.
Okay.
What's your bet?
I can't take that bet because I feel the same way. But
Okay.
it's one of those situations where, well, basically you already said it, but I did have a question. Do you think we could remove the second film completely? Could you go 1 to 3 and been completely happy?
Yes. I don't think the only thing that really bled from 2 to 3 was the fact that the documentary crew from the second film, the rest of the world knew that they had somehow mysteriously disappeared. Like that was the big thing. Like nobody knew what happened to them. That was the biggest moment. I mean, the rest of it really didn't have any bearing on it. It kind of just all relied again on what happened in the first movie with Alex opening the gate.
Yeah. So going forward, recommending this story to other people, would you tell them to watch all 3? Or would you say watch the first one, appreciate it for what it is, watch the third one to get it wrapped up?
No, I think you watch all 3 because again, there are moments in 3 that you won't fully understand without seeing the second one. It's not enough to take away the full plot, but there's just enough where you're gonna go, who's that person, or what are they talking about? You know, and I think it's important. I mean, to me, that's like telling somebody to read. Well, maybe not exactly because there are bigger plot points than that, but you wouldn't tell somebody to read Harry Potter, but say, oh, by the way, you know, skip Chamber of Secrets. It's not my favorite, you know, or you know, but because I think
I struggle with that question today. I finished the film yesterday and I was thinking about it, kind of just playing through some of the plot points and the storylines, and I just could not pick out anything that I really needed from the second film. Specifically,
I think it's very close. I think it's very close to being able to say, like, there's a difference between you have to watch it to understand it and, you know, you should watch it just to appreciate it. And I don't know, there's like a gray area with this because, like I said, there's so few, I think, if my memory serves me, there's so few significant plot points in 2 that matter in 3. But at the same time, I mean, you want to see the whole picture, right? You want to know the full story.
Yeah, I get that. It was just one of those situations where I loved 1, and you did too.
Oh,
I just love it for that genre.
Wait, hold on. You have to watch 2 for this one reason that we actually kind of complained about 2, because you get the whole history lesson at the end of the movie with Tully and what he's actually doing and what he's trying to do with the gate in the hotel and all his moving pieces.
I thought about that, but I mean, is it really necessary though that you have to understand what's going on?
If you remove 2 completely from the picture and you go from HOUSE LLC, the crew, all vanishing / dying, and then you jump right into 3, only knowing that they vanished. And now Russell Wynn has come in, and you've never seen Andrew Tully before. You don't know how Russell Wynn has gotten the footage that he got from the people in the second movie, which you wouldn't even know who they were if you didn't see the second movie.
It's true.
I think you. I can't believe I'm saying this after the last episode. I think you need that exposition from number 2 to understand what's happening in 3 to a certain degree. Okay. I don't think you needed to explain the way it was explained in number 2, but
that's right.
it filled in the gap.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'll agree. I'll agree with you. It probably is something necessary. It's just one of the situations where we both agree that 2 was probably the weaker of the films, and I don't want it to bring down the story as a whole. You know what I mean? Because we both love number 1. The first one, from a found footage in that sub-genre, it was so strong. It was a really great film. Number 3 is a really good film too. And it's one that you have to be intimate with. You have to know the characters, not necessarily from 2, but you gotta know and understand the characters from 1 and have an understanding of what the house is doing or what they're doing with the house, and then be able to wrap it up. With the, you know, minus the ending of 2, I think it's, take it or leave it. But I think you do have to have that. I think you're right. You do have to have that explanation of it.
Yeah. Overall, though, I really enjoyed watching the trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to recommend I'm going to continue to recommend the first film to people repeatedly. Whenever people ask me, hey, I want to watch a scary movie, what should I watch? Hey, it's Halloween. Got any movies to recommend? Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
HOUSE LLC, the first one, is always going to be on my recommendation list from now on. But if they say, hey, there's two more, should I watch them? I feel like there's going to be an asterisk with my answer. Like, the first one's fantastic. You can watch the second one and the third one. They finish the story, but you're okay with just watching the first one.
You really are. You don't have to finish the story because number one is a great standalone movie.
Right. And I was actually, I watched the first one again well before we did our episode on the first Hell House movie. And I was perfectly okay with not watching the others. I knew the sequels were out there, and I just never really kind of went after them. We started the podcast, we started talking, and we're like, you know what, might as well go ahead and do this and see what the rest of them are about for the sake of our episodes, because we were genuinely curious. But I went months with only having seen the first one and was completely fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I also don't know that I wasn't actually expecting the story to continue on the same spectrum, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't actually know it was going to be like an overarching 3 movies to tell the whole picture. I was actually in my head thinking it was going to be more like 3 standalone films exploring a similar kind of theme / incident. But anyway, I'm glad I watched them. I'm glad we watched them. I'm glad we talked about them. They were good. And again, I said this, I think, in the first movie episode, they are still, every single one of them, the type of movie, type of film that, as an aspiring creative, they make you want to go make something. And found footage films always do that to me. The first one of this definitely did it for me. It just, you look at it and you go, man, I want to make something like that. I think I could make something like that, because found footage, and believe me, I know they're not simple. Not filmmaking is not easy at all by any means, but they have the appearance of giving you that confidence that you can say, you know what, I could take my GoPro or my iPhone, I can go out there and I can make something like this right now if I really wanted to. And there's obviously a bigger picture, but you know what I'm trying to say. They're inspiring to creatives, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think found footage is a genre that's probably much more difficult though than we think, because the found footage, while it lends itself well to not having to have great cinematography, and you don't need this great production, but it has to be wrapped in a great story.
Yep.
So you've got to have that first. And so just like the issue I was talking about with we don't really know what he received, and we never really see what it is, and we never really see what he uses it for. It's one of those situations where you're going to be pushed into a corner creatively with that kind of stuff, with a found footage sort of deal. I think it's honestly, it's after watching the more found footage movies I watch, like you said, it is inspiring to want to do those, but I think it's probably the more I see, the more difficult I think they really are. I think they're a hard movie to make.
I think they're a hard movie to write, if I had to guess. I think when you got to the nuts and bolts of it, I think creating shot lists for found footage movies is probably difficult when you try to explore what you need to have captured.
Mm-hmm.
But I think writing, and we were just talking about with the Lazy Susan scene, I think writing with found footage in mind I would actually really love to see the screenplay of the first film now and see what it looked like on paper to what actually translated to the screen and how you do it. I read an interview. It was online. I have no idea what site it was on, what blog it was on. I just Googled Stephen Cognetti interview and found a couple of them. I was reading through some of them, and one of them, he states that he never actually, I'm completely paraphrasing this, something along the lines of, he had never actually seen himself writing a horror film or making a horror film, like as his first feature or when making movies. Like that wasn't his aspiration. And then something happened. He got the idea for Hell House, and he started writing it. And basically, okay, all of a sudden now his first feature is a horror film. And I think that's also really interesting, like to be a screenwriter and to not even really have any ambition to write a horror film, and then all of a sudden you've got a really successful horror film on your hands that you made. Like, it's interesting to me that wasn't the first thought, because it's such a genre that I think so many people gravitate toward naturally. Like, you either like horror or you don't. There's not a lot of people that are in between with that. So,
yeah, and I agree. But like you said, there's so many sub-genres of horror that some people, somebody that really likes horror might not necessarily like the gory stuff, or somebody that really likes horror might not necessarily like the found footage stuff. It's such a vast category that you can't do broad strokes with it, unfortunately.
Right. I think to end this episode, I'd like to get like your opinion on, or we can wrap up with kind of like our unofficial rating review of the individual films, which I think we've already kind of beat to death, but we'll give them a final like cemented slot in order of our favor, and then also the way that we feel about the trilogy as a whole as we wrap this up. I'll go first. I'll just say again, wholeheartedly, the first film is amazing. It's one of the best found footage films I've ever seen. I will hold it right up there with the Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity. I think it's deserving of being on the mantle with those three. The second film is by far the weakest, so I'm going number 1, number 3, and then number 2 in order of favorites. And then overall, the trilogy as a whole, it's an interesting thing because we already talked about it. I don't think there's a lot of trilogies that you can legitimately go to people and say, this is a 3-film, endeavor, but you can watch the first one and be perfectly fine, like we just said a minute ago. And that is so weird to me to say that. Like, if you think about other ones, any of the Star Wars trilogies, right? The Lord of the Rings trilogy, like, you can't watch one and not go get the whole story from the rest of them, right?
Sure.
It's just a strange thing. So that's why my overall feel of the trilogy is a little shaky. I'm happy with it. I'm very satisfied with the way this story wrapped up. I'm impressed with the way the story wrapped up. But I still say, if you only got time to watch one and that bothers you, don't worry about it. Just watch the first one. You'll be perfectly fine.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on all of your points. The rating system, 1 being our favorite, 3 being our second tier, and then the second being the third favorite of that trilogy, and 1 being a great found footage horror film. It hits all the right notes. It's a great story. It's great editing, amazing acting. It's just elevated in so many ways. But I also do love that he expanded on the universe and that he made more story to it. And so I love that, they dipped into 2 and 3, and I like how it wraps up. And just like you said, recommending it to people, absolutely watch number 1, great movie. And if you feel like seeing the rest of the story, go ahead, watch number 2 and 3. You don't have to, but it is a fun ride, and it's nice to see everything wrap up too. In fact, I actually just recommended Hell House, the first one, to 2 people this week. It's just just a great film, just overall. So, yeah. And I did the same. I did what I just said. I was like, the one is great, and there is a rest of the story if you feel inclined.
Right.
But you don't have to.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. You can watch one, you can love it. If you want to know more, keep playing the game. Go ahead and hit the next one. So, I'm curious if what Stephen Cognetti has in the works. If there's more coming, whether it's with this storyline at all, or whether if it's different stuff. I wonder now, does he is he pegged in the horror genre now? Like, or is his next feature going to be a drama? Who knows? I mean,
it's super interesting that horror was not what he was going for in the beginning, and then he just happened to hit it, and he did a good job at it.
Yeah.
Like for somebody that wasn't like looking to do a horror, it's a damn good film. You know, number one is. Absolutely. I feel like number one has got to be just what he was doing, and then there just happened to be like, okay, well, maybe the story can go on, so we'll move on with 2 and 3.
Yeah, maybe so. And again, if that's the case, if it was not planned as a, if it was not planned as a trilogy from the beginning, I think that makes it even more easy to forgive any of the potential plot holes of 2 and 3 when you figure that it was a story that had to be told after the fact that wasn't initially planned for. Because if you think about it that way, it is pretty damn impressive. But anyway, any final thoughts on anything about the HOUSE LLC trilogy, Jason?
No, I think it was a great story. I really super enjoyed watching all 3 of the movies, and I'm glad I did. I know we were a little harsh on the second one, but 1 and 3 were great, and the story is great. 1 is amazing as a standalone film. I liked it.
Agreed to all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 10 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. My name is Michael Robertson Jr. My co-host is Jason Collins. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to do us a huge favor, if you could leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice, like or subscribe, we would all really, really appreciate that. Thanks so much, and we'll be back next week with a brand new episode.